The Galactic Engineering Guild headquarters buzzed with whispers as Engineer Park Jaiwan, the first human ever admitted to their prestigious ranks, stepped through the gleaming doors. Standing slightly shorter than most but with a solid frame that hinted at his homeworld's punishing gravity, Jaiwan scanned the room with calm determination. Chief Engineer Du Teho of the Meridian species barely concealed his skepticism. His translucent antennae twitched as he reviewed Jaiwan's credentials. Impressive qualifications, Engineer Park, Teho said, six-fingered hands carefully placing the holographic display down. Though I remain uncertain how your experience on, what did your species call it? A death world? How this prepares you for the precision required at Stellar Research Station 12. Jaiwan nodded respectfully. Earth's environmental challenges required us to develop particularly robust containment systems. Radiation shielding became our specialty by necessity. Necessity, echoed Teho, the translator struggling to convey his tone. We shall see if Deathworld engineering has a place among the stars. The journey to the research station orbiting the neutron star was tense but mercifully brief. As Jaiwan settled into his quarters, he received a message from junior engineer Kim Nari, the only staff member who had volunteered to partner with him. Your radiation containment theories, her message read. They contradict standard protocols, but the mathematics are sound. Perhaps there is something to learn from Earth methods after all. The following morning, Jaiwan entered the main engineering bay. The room fell silent. 7 alien engineers stopped their work to stare at him. Their bodies were different shapes and colors, but they all shared the same look of doubt. The human has arrived, announced Teho. Engineer Park will assist with radiation containment for the Quantum Cascade project. A tall, blue-skinned engineer named Bak Sungmin stepped forward. We already have containment protocols that have worked for 300 years. What could a Deathworlder possibly teach us? Jaiwan didn't respond to the challenge. Instead, he walked to the central display and studied the reactor designs. After a moment, he pointed to the secondary cooling system. Your radiation barrier is strong, but it assumes perfect conditions. What happens if the cooling fails? It won't fail, Sungmin replied sharply. Our systems are perfect. Nothing is perfect, Jaiwan said quietly. On Earth, we plan for failure. Later that day, Director Kong Min-jae called Jaiwan to his office. The director was small with gray skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. Engineer Park, he said, I understand you've already begun questioning our established protocols. With respect, Director, I'm only asking about safety backups. The director's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. Your species' reputation precedes you. Humans always expect the worst to happen. But here at Station 12, we work with precision. Our systems don't fail. Jaiwan wanted to argue but held his tongue. The director dismissed him with a wave of his 3-fingered hand. That evening, as Jaiwan ate alone in the station's cafeteria, Engineer Kim Nari approached his table. She was tall and slender with iridescent scales covering her face and arms. May I join you? She asked. Jaiwan nodded, surprised by the friendly gesture. I've studied Earth's engineering history, she said, sitting down. Your planet's harsh conditions forced your species to develop remarkable survival skills. Your backup systems have backup systems. We learned through failure, Jaiwan explained. Many humans died before we understood how dangerous radiation could be. Nari leaned forward. I believe your caution has value. The others don't yet, but I do. Over the next week, Jaiwan struggled to fit in with the alien engineering team. They ignored his suggestions and excluded him from meetings. Only Nari seemed interested in his ideas. One night, working late, Jaiwan discovered something alarming in the reactor designs. The primary containment field had no manual override. If the automated systems failed, there would be no way to prevent a catastrophic meltdown. He immediately called Nari to the lab. Look at this, he said, pointing to the schematics. No manual backup. Her eyes widened. That's standard protocol. The system never fails, so no manual override is needed. But what if it does fail? Then, She paused, suddenly understanding. Then everyone on the station would die. Exactly. On Earth, we would never build a system without manual controls. Nari nodded slowly. I see why your people survived your dangerous world. You always prepare for the worst. Will you help me present this concern to Teiho? Yes, she said firmly. The others may not appreciate your Deathworld caution now, but they might someday. Perhaps sooner than they think. As they worked through the night redesigning the safety systems, neither of them knew just how right she was. The reactor test was only 3 weeks away, and Jaiwon's Deathworld instincts were about to save them all. 3 months into the project, Jaiwon stood before the station director, Lee Sunho, trying to remain calm as his concerns were once again dismissed. Engineer Park, Sunho's feathered crest flattened in irritation. The timeline has been approved by the Galactic Science Council. Your persistent requests for additional testing are noted but unnecessary. Director Lee, the containment field harmonics are showing increasing instability. Standard tolerances don't account for. Standard tolerances have served the galaxy for millennia, Sunho interrupted. Your species' excessive caution is understandable given your harsh planetary origins, but here among civilized space, we follow established protocols. Later that cycle, Jaiwon found Nari reviewing his rejected safety proposals in the engineering lab. These modifications, she said quietly, 6 eyes blinking in sequence as she studied the designs. They would have prevented 3 historical containment failures I can identify immediately. That's why I'm implementing them anyway, Jaiwon said, showing her the unauthorized changes to the emergency systems he'd been making during night shifts. Sometimes it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. Nari's exoskeleton clicked as she shifted nervously. If Director Lee discovers this. If I'm wrong, I'll accept the consequences, Jaiwon replied. But if I'm right. That night, Jaiwon crept through the dimly lit corridors of Stellar Research Station 12. Most of the alien crew needed less sleep than humans, but they followed strict rest cycles. The station was quiet. Jaiwon reached the main engineering bay and quickly entered his access code. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, blue emergency lights cast eerie shadows across the equipment. The quantum cascade reactor sat at the center of the room, its core pulsing with faint energy even in standby mode. He moved to the control panel and inserted a small device he had built in his quarters. The screen flickered as his unauthorized program bypassed the security protocols. If anyone checked the logs, they would find nothing unusual. Jaiwon had become good at covering his tracks. What are you doing? A voice asked from the darkness. Jaiwon spun around, heart racing. Chief Engineer Teiho stepped into the blue light, his antennae twitching rapidly. I'm installing additional safety measures, Jaiwon said honestly. There was no point lying now. Without authorization. It wasn't a question. Yes. Teiho moved closer, examining the screen. These modifications override the standard containment protocols. They supplement them, Jaiwon corrected. If the main systems fail, these backups will engage automatically. Teiho was silent for a long moment. You truly believe our systems will fail? I believe in preparing for every possibility. The chief engineer's compound eyes reflected the blue light as he studied Jaiwon. Your species survived because you always expect disaster. We survived because we plan for it, Jaiwon countered. To his surprise, Teiho didn't call security. Instead, he pointed to the screen. Explain these modifications. For the next hour, Jaiwon walked Teiho through his backup systems. The manual override that could be activated even if main power failed. The redundant cooling system that would engage if radiation levels spiked. The emergency containment field that operated on a separate power source. When he finished, Teiho was quiet. Finally, he said, your designs have merit. But they suggest a lack of faith in our established systems. It's not about faith, Jaiwon said. It's about survival. The next morning, Jaiwon was summoned to Director Lee's office. His heart sank. Teiho must have reported him after all. Lee was standing at the viewport, watching the neutron star pulse in the distance. He didn't turn when Jaiwan entered. "Engineer Park," he said, his voice strangely subdued. "Our latest tests show containment field harmonics fluctuating outside normal parameters." Jaiwan felt a surge of vindication but kept his expression neutral. "As I reported in my assessment." "Yes." Lee finally turned to face him. "Chief Engineer Teiho has reviewed your unofficial modifications. He believes they have merit." Jaiwan tried to hide his surprise. Teiho had defended his work? However, Lee continued, his feathered crest rising slightly, "Your unauthorized actions cannot be tolerated. You will be formally reprimanded." "I understand, Director. But your safety measures will be implemented." Lee seemed to struggle with the words. "Under supervision." That afternoon, Jaiwan worked alongside Teiho to properly install his backup systems. The alien engineer remained distant but no longer dismissive. "The reactor test is scheduled for next week," Teiho said as they finished the installations. "The Galactic Science Council representatives will be here to observe. Will we have time to test the new safety systems before then?" Jaiwan asked. "No. Director Lee will not delay the demonstration." Teiho's antennae drooped slightly. "He faces significant pressure from the council." That night, Jaiwan found Nari waiting outside his quarters. Her exoskeleton gleamed under the corridor lights. "You were right," she said without preamble. "The latest sensor readings show radiation microleaks in the secondary chamber. The others are ignoring it, calling it within acceptable parameters." "Nothing about radiation leaks is acceptable," Jaiwan replied. "I've been thinking about what you said, about Earth and survival." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I believe something is very wrong with the reactor core design itself." Jaiwan felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "How wrong?" "If my calculations are correct," she said, "there's a 60% chance of catastrophic failure during the demonstration. We need to stop the test." "They won't listen." Nari's 6 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of distress in her species. "Not without proof." "Then we'll get proof," Jaiwan said grimly. "Tonight." The observation deck gleamed as dignitaries from 17 systems gathered to witness the activation of the experimental quantum cascade reactor. Director Lee preened before the assembled officials, his speech translated into multiple languages simultaneously. "And with this breakthrough, energy production will enter a new era of efficiency." In the control room below, Jaiwan watched the reactor metrics with growing alarm. "The harmonic resonance is already exceeding projected maximum levels," he told Chief Engineer Teiho. "We need to abort." "Nonsense," Teiho responded, mandibles clicking dismissively. "Your instruments must be calibrated to human sensitivities. The readings are within acceptable parameters." When the first containment field collapsed, there was barely a sound, just a soft alarm and flickering lights. The second field failure triggered emergency protocols, bathing the station in pulsing red light. "Evacuate the control room," Jaiwan shouted as radiation levels spiked dramatically. The alien engineers began collapsing, their bodies unprepared for radiation levels that, while dangerous to humans, were immediately devastating to their physiologies. Jaiwan saw Nari fall. He dragged her to the emergency shelter before turning back toward the core. Someone had to manually activate the final failsafe or the entire station would be lost. The last security door slid open, revealing the blinding light of the destabilizing core. Jaiwan stepped forward into radiation levels that would kill any known sentient species. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, but his cells, evolved on a planet bombarded by cosmic radiation, extreme weather, and constant environmental threats, continued functioning just long enough. His hand found the emergency shutdown. The explosion engulfed him as the system initiated its desperate last resort containment. The morning of the demonstration had started with a feeling of dread in Jaiwan's stomach. He watched as alien dignitaries filed into the observation deck, their fancy clothes glittering under the lights. They chatted excitedly, unaware of the danger. Jaiwan had checked the reactor readings 3 times already. Each time, the numbers worried him more. The core temperature was slightly higher than it should be. The containment field showed tiny fluctuations. Nothing that would alarm the other engineers, but to Jaiwan, trained on a death world where small problems quickly became deadly ones, these were serious warning signs. He tried one more time to speak with Director Lee before the demonstration. "Director, please. The readings suggest potential instability," Jaiwan said quietly, not wanting to alarm the guests. Lee's feathered crest rose in anger. "Engineer Park, control your death world paranoia. This is the most important day in our station's history." The demonstration began exactly on schedule. The observation deck erupted in polite applause as Director Lee activated the main display screen. "Distinguished guests," Lee announced, "today we harness the power of quantum cascade technology like never before." In the control room, Jaiwan stood beside Taeho and 3 other alien engineers. His eyes never left the monitoring station. "Beginning power sequence," called out Engineer Bak Sungmin, his blue fingers dancing across the controls. The reactor hummed to life. On the screens, energy readings began to climb. The aliens nodded approvingly as the numbers rose steadily. Jaiwan was the only one who noticed the harmonic resonance indicator flashing yellow. "Chief Taeho," Jaiwan said urgently, "the harmonic resonance is within acceptable parameters." Taeho cut him off. "Focus on your assigned station, human." 2 minutes later, the yellow warning turned red. The harmonic resonance was now well beyond safe levels. The reactor core was vibrating at a frequency that would eventually shatter the containment field. "We need to abort now," Jaiwan insisted, loud enough that everyone in the control room turned to look at him. Taeho's antennae flattened against his head in anger. "You embarrass yourself and your species with this display. The readings are..." He never finished his sentence. The first containment field failed with nothing more than a soft chime from the computer and flickering overhead lights. For a moment, everyone froze, not comprehending what had happened. Then the second field failed. Red emergency lights bathed the room as alarms began to sound. On the main screen, radiation levels rose rapidly into the danger zone. "Impossible," gasped Sungmin. "The system cannot fail this way." But it was failing. Rapidly. The third and final containment field was already showing signs of collapse. Invisible radiation filled the room, harmless to humans for brief exposure but immediately toxic to the alien physiologies. Taeho fell first, his mandibles chattering uncontrollably as his nervous system responded to the radiation poisoning. Then Sungmin dropped to his knees, blue skin already turning gray. "Emergency evacuation," Jaiwan shouted into the station-wide comm system. "All personnel to radiation shelters immediately." Through the viewport, he could see panic on the observation deck as dignitaries rushed toward the exits. The automatic doors had sealed, trapping many inside as the station's safety systems activated. Nari staggered toward him, her 6 eyes already clouding with radiation damage. "The failsafe," she gasped. "It must be activated manually now." Jaiwan caught her as she collapsed. He lifted her surprisingly light body and carried her to the nearest emergency shelter. Inside, medical systems would help her survive until proper treatment could be provided. "Stay here," he told her, knowing she was barely conscious. The radiation readings on his personal monitor were now flashing red. For a human, he had perhaps 10 minutes before severe damage would begin. For the aliens, exposure had already proved devastating. Jaiwan ran toward the core. The corridor seemed longer than usual, the red emergency lights creating strange shadows. His skin began to tingle, then burn, as the radiation increased with every step closer to the failing reactor. The final security door required both retinal scan and manual override. Jaiwan punched in his code and pressed his eye against the scanner. The door slid open, revealing hell. The reactor core pulsed with blinding light. Raw energy and deadly radiation poured from fissures in the casing. The heat hit Jaiwan like a physical blow, making it hard to breathe. He staggered forward, skin blistering, eyes burning. The manual failsafe was 20 steps away, behind a final shield wall. Each step was agony. His muscles began to spasm as radiation attacked his nervous system. 19 steps. 18. Jaiwan forced himself forward. On Earth, humans had survived radiation, extreme temperatures, crushing pressures. His ancestors had endured worse than this and lived to pass on their genes. 17 steps. 16. By the time he reached the failsafe control, his vision was blurring. Blood ran from his nose and ears. He could barely stand. With the last of his strength, Jaiwan pressed his palm against the scanner and pulled the emergency lever down. The explosion threw him against the wall as the containment system initiated its final protocol. White light enveloped everything. Then darkness. Medical Officer Yoon Miho had treated many species in his long career, but he had never seen anything like this. The human lay in the recovery chamber, terribly burned but somehow, impossibly, alive. His cellular structure should have been completely destroyed, Miho explained to the gathered officials from the engineering guild. The radiation levels in that chamber were 100 times the immediately lethal dose for Meridians. And yet he lives, observed Guild representative Choi Yunha, her crystalline form refracting light as she moved closer to the medical readout. How is this possible? Deathworld adaptations, Miho replied. His species evolved on a planet that constantly tried to kill them. Their bodies developed repair mechanisms we've never seen before. Outside the medical bay, a growing crowd of engineers from across the station submitted their resignations. One by one, they transferred their credentials to the central system. I cannot work in an environment where such things are possible, Chief Engineer Taeho told Director Lee. These humans, they survive what should destroy them. It defies all engineering safety principles. They are walking impossibilities, agreed another engineer. Our entire understanding of biological limitations is flawed. As the resignation count reached 43, Nari sat beside Jaiwan's recovery pod, watching his vital signs grow stronger day by day. She alone had requested transfer to the human division. 3 weeks after the reactor explosion, Jaiwan's recovery pod hissed open. The medical bay was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. His eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the light. Pain radiated through his body, but he was alive. The impossible human awakens, said a gentle voice. Jaiwan turned his head to see Medical Officer Miho standing by the bed. The alien's forearms were checking various monitors while his large eyes studied Jaiwan with scientific curiosity. What happened? Jaiwan asked, his voice raspy from disuse. You survived what should have killed you 100 times over, Miho replied simply. And in doing so, you've turned the Galactic Engineering Guild upside down. Miho helped Jaiwan sit up. Through the medical bay windows, Jaiwan could see the station was still intact. The emergency systems had worked. The others? Jaiwan asked. Nari? Taeho? All survived, thanks to your actions, Miho said. Though many suffered radiation poisoning, there were no deaths. But Jaiwan sensed there was more. Miho's skin changed color slightly, a sign of discomfort in his species. But many cannot accept what happened. Cannot accept you. Later that day, when Jaiwan was strong enough to stand, Nari came to visit. She looked different. The radiation damage had left her exoskeleton slightly discolored in places, but her 6 eyes were clear and focused. You saved all of us, she said without preamble. And now they fear you. Jaiwan frowned. Fear me? Why? Because you shouldn't exist, she explained. The records show you were exposed to radiation levels that should have destroyed all organic matter instantly. Yet here you stand. She led him to a window overlooking the main engineering bay. It was nearly empty. The few engineers present worked quietly, subdued. 43 engineers have resigned, Nari said. They cannot reconcile what happened with their understanding of the universe. That's ridiculous, Jaiwan said. Humans aren't indestructible. I'm badly injured. But you're alive, Nari countered. And that terrifies them. Director Lee entered the medical bay, his feathered crest now permanently flat against his head. He could not meet Jaiwan's eyes. "The Galactic Science Council has launched a full investigation," he said stiffly. "I am being reassigned." "And the station?" Jaiwan asked. "Will be rebuilt with new safety protocols." Lee finally looked at him. "Your protocols? The human standard safety measures you implemented saved the station from complete destruction." That evening, Jaiwan was surprised to see Chief Engineer Tejo at his door. The Moranian looked diminished somehow, his usual confidence gone. "I have submitted my resignation," Tejo said without greeting. "As have most of the senior engineering staff." "That's not necessary," Jaiwan replied. "We can learn from what happened." Tejo's antennae twitched rapidly. "You don't understand. It's not just what happened. It's you. You walked into radiation that would melt our instruments, and you survived." Barely, Jaiwan pointed to his bandaged arms. "That's not the point," Tejo insisted. "Our entire understanding of biological limitations has been proven wrong. If humans can survive what you survived, what else is possible? What other assumptions are wrong?" A week later, representatives from the Galactic Engineering Guild arrived to inspect the damage and review the incident. Guild representative Choi Yunha requested a private meeting with Jaiwan. "Your medical scans have been shared with our top scientists," she said, her crystalline body catching the light as she moved. "They are disturbed by what they see." "My recovery?" Jaiwan asked. "Your existence," she corrected. "Your cellular structure shows damage but also remarkable repair mechanisms. Your DNA can reconstruct itself in ways we thought impossible. Earth is dangerous," Jaiwan explained simply. "We adapted." Yunha's crystal form pulsed with light, her species equivalent of a thoughtful expression. "We've always called your homeworld a Deathworld as a scientific classification. Now we understand it's not just a harsh environment. It's a crucible that forged something extraordinary." As his recovery continued, Jaiwan noticed how the remaining station staff kept their distance. They watched him with a mixture of fear and awe. Only Nari treated him normally, visiting daily to discuss the station repairs. "They've approved the formation of a human safety division," she told him one day. "I've applied to be your assistant." "Why?" Jaiwan asked. "Everyone else is running away." Nari's exoskeleton clicked softly as she shifted position. "Because you were right. Because preparing for the worst saved us all. And because I want to understand how Deathworlders think." "We think about survival," Jaiwan said simply. "Always." 6 months later, Jaiwan stood before the newly formed Human Standard Safety Division of the Galactic Engineering Guild. His body still bore the scars of the reactor incident, but he moved with confidence as he addressed the mixed class of human and alien engineers. "Safety protocols are not about preventing every accident," he explained. "They're about surviving the accidents that will inevitably happen." In the front row, former Chief Engineer Tejo, now the most vocal advocate for human engineering principles, nodded in agreement. His conversion had shocked the engineering community, but after studying the incident data, he had become convinced. "Engineer Park demonstrated what my people have always missed," Tejo told colleagues. "We engineered for perfect conditions. Humans engineer for survival when everything fails." Director Lee had been replaced by Director Hondo Hyan, a veteran engineer with decades of experience on deep space vessels. Under his leadership, the station had been rebuilt with dual safety systems, traditional galactic protocols layered with human standard emergency measures. As the new quantum cascade reactor powered up successfully, Nari joined Jaiwan in the observation room. She wore the newly created insignia of the Cross-Species Engineering Corps. "They still look at you with fear," she noted as several alien engineers gave Jaiwan a wide berth. "They'll adjust," Jaiwan replied with a small smile. "Just as we did when we discovered we weren't alone in the universe. Fear becomes curiosity, and curiosity becomes understanding." Beyond the viewport, the neutron star pulsed steadily, its energy now safely harnessed. The station that had nearly been destroyed now served as the model for a new era of galactic engineering, one that embraced the resilience and adaptability that had allowed humans to survive and thrive on their Deathworld home. The rebuilt Stellar Research Station 12 gleamed in the light of the neutron star. Where once there had been a single control center, now there were two. One built to alien standards of perfection, and one built to human standards of survival. Both worked together in harmony. Jaiwan walked through the hallways, nodding to passing engineers. Some still averted their eyes, but more and more returned his greeting. The scars on his face and hands had faded to pink lines, permanent reminders of his journey into the heart of the reactor core. In the main lecture hall, 20 alien engineers and 5 humans sat waiting for him. This was the third class of the Human Standard Safety Division, and each group was larger than the last. Today we will discuss emergency reactor containment, Jaiwan said as he activated the display screen. Not how to prevent failures, but how to survive them. A blue-skinned engineer raised his hand. But superior engineering should prevent failures entirely. Jaiwan smiled. He had heard this argument many times. Tell me, does your homeworld have storms? The alien looked confused. Of course. And do you build your houses to withstand these storms? Naturally. Then you already understand human engineering, Jaiwan explained. Nature will always find a way to test your systems. The wise engineer plans for this. After class, Taeho approached Jaiwan. The Meridian's antennae twitched with excitement. The Galactic Council has approved our proposal, he said. All new reactor designs must include human standard safety measures. Your near-death has changed engineering practices across 17 systems. Jaiwan nodded, still uncomfortable with his status as a living example of Deathworld survival. How many more engineers resigned when they heard the news? None, Taeho said, surprising him. In fact, applications to work with humans have increased. Fear is giving way to curiosity, as you predicted. That evening, Jaiwan met Director Han in the new observation lounge. The rebuilt station featured larger windows, allowing spectacular views of the neutron star. Han was a serious, compact man with decades of deep space experience. The reactor performance exceeds all expectations, Han said without preamble. The council is pleased. And the safety systems? Both sets are functioning perfectly. Han turned to face Jaiwan directly. Your emergency measures have been tested in simulations. They would have prevented 97% of historical reactor failures across the galaxy. And the other 3%? Han smiled slightly. Would have been survivable disasters rather than complete catastrophes. Your approach is changing how the galaxy thinks about engineering. Later, Jaiwan found Nari in the engineering lab, working with 3 alien apprentices. Her position as liaison between human and alien engineering teams had made her highly respected. Tomorrow we test the emergency shutdown sequence, she told him when the others had left. Will you observe? Of course. She hesitated, then asked, does it bother you? That many still see you as some kind of impossible creature? Jaiwan considered the question. At first, yes. But now I understand their reaction better. We humans take our adaptability for granted. Your species evolved on a planet that tried to kill you in 100 ways every day, Nari said. You learned to expect disaster. We evolved on gentler worlds where systems rarely failed catastrophically. We learned to expect perfection. Both approaches have value, Jaiwan replied. That's why the new combined systems work so well. The next day, as the test shutdown sequence ran flawlessly, Jaiwan noticed something remarkable. The viewing area was packed with alien engineers, all watching intently as the human-designed safety measures engaged one by one. There was no fear in their expressions, now only professional interest. After the demonstration, a young Meridian engineer approached him. Is it true you want to develop emergency measures for space station hull breaches next? Yes, Jaiwan replied, surprised by the question. I would like to assist, the engineer said. I believe the Deathworld perspective could save many lives in vacuum exposure scenarios. As more engineers gathered around, asking questions about human survival techniques, Jaiwan caught Nari's eye across the room. She gave him a knowing look. The fear was fading. Understanding was growing. And throughout the galaxy, engineers were beginning to see that preparing for the worst wasn't admitting defeat, it was the ultimate form of optimism. It was believing that even in the face of disaster, survival was possible. Beyond the viewing port, the neutron star pulsed steadily, neither friendly nor hostile. Just like the universe itself, it simply was beautiful, dangerous, and indifferent to the tiny beings who sought to harness its power. But those beings were learning, adapting, and growing stronger together. The end.